Your dreams are bigger, bolder, and more badass than the life you're living now, but something just keeps getting in the way. Join certified coach and former therapist Diane Wingert for the Driven Woman podcast. She'll show you how to get rid of whatever is holding you back so you can stop spinning your wheels and up-level your life. Get ready to hop in and buckle up. This is the Driven Woman podcast, and we're heading for the fast lane.
Hey, Driven Woman. Are you one of those crazy busy female solopreneurs who thinks that passion, energy, drive, and creativity is going to get you where you want to go so that you don't even need a plan, maybe even including a business plan? Yeah, I see you. As a matter of fact, a whole lot of driven but distracted female entrepreneurs think this way, including me. Hand raised. But I'll tell you what I learned the hard way is that without a plan, I may get far. I did get far, but I didn't get all the way to my most important goals. I had every excuse in the book for why I couldn't plan. I shouldn't plan. I didn't know how to plan. I made a plan and I didn't follow it anyway, so why bother? And if any of this sounds familiar, you are definitely going to want to pay close attention to this interview. The truth was, I just didn't think I would follow through, and having a plan would be evidence that I wasn't doing what I should. So I just didn't. But I'll tell you what I do now. Today's guest, Mridu Parikh, is a former professional organizer turned productivity coach. She's also an author, a podcaster, a speaker, and is going to make you fall in love with planning, I promise. Not only does she believe that planning creates freedom, but that we're never going to reach our most important goals unless we do learn how to plan. And planning can even be fun. Mridu specializes in helping overwhelmed mompreneurs prioritize and systemize so they can finally get ahead of their demands and their distractions at home and at work. And nowadays, all of that is happening in the same place. Couple of highlights you are going to want to listen for are: Mridu says most women treat their brain like a warehouse when they should think of it as a factory. Ooh, so good. She's going to teach us how to stay focused on our most important goals each day by anchoring to them with a very simple technique she's going to share with us. And this one was a little hard for me to hear, but absolutely freaking true. Clarity comes from taking action, not from thinking. You are just going to love this guest and this interview. All the links to everything about Mridu are in the show notes, including a terrific freebie she has for us called 21 Killer Hacks to Stop Feeling Overwhelmed, and a link to her Amazon bestseller. Her company is called Life is Organized, and you're just going to love her. So without further delay, I bring you my new friend, Mridu Parikh. And if she doesn't make you fall in love with planning once and for all, or at the very least become completely convinced it's necessary and can be fun, let me know. Here we go. So today I am welcoming my new friend and productivity expert, Mridu Parikh of Life is Organized. She is a fellow podcaster with the Productivity on Purpose podcast, and we have found that we have quite a bit in common, including the fact that we both help women who have big dreams and big goals, but don't always have the right plan to get them there. So I am welcoming her today to talk to us about her framework for reaching our goals through the just right kind of plan. So welcome, my friend. I cannot wait to dig into this topic with you.
Me too. We were like jabbing it up earlier when we got to know each other, and I know we're just going to have so much fun on this.
Awesome. So you also work with female entrepreneurs, and a lot more of your clients are moms. So without a good plan, moms are outnumbered for one thing, and there's just so many things to keep track of and juggle. So planning is absolutely critical for them, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I find that lots of entrepreneurs feel that their success comes from more doing, but in reality, their success comes from more planning. And that's a really big distinction. It's not doing more. It's better planning, more planning. I always say your success lies in your ability to plan.
You know what? That can't be falling on some not so receptive ears right now, because I think a lot of women feel like they have a lot of passion, they have a lot of energy, they work hard. So why do they have to plan? Like, that's boring. Planning feels like too detailed, too restrictive. They'd rather just wing it and do it as they go along. In fact, what I say in defense of those who say they don't want to plan or planning doesn't work for them, I'm sure you've heard this too. Planning doesn't work for me. I prefer to work organically. Or planning doesn't work for me because it spoils my creativity or it just zaps my energy. Now, I am a recovering non-planner myself. I used to think that I could get wherever I needed to go simply because I think fast, I do fast, I have a lot of energy, and I have a lot of determination. But the truth is, Mridu, I didn't make it all the way to many of my most important goals, and then I would just make up excuses for why they didn't happen. I am now absolutely committed to planning and to getting better and better at it. And I think you are going to help me with that today, along with everyone listening. So where shall we start?
Well, first of all, I just want to start by saying that I do hear that. You're so right. And I feel like so many women feel like this is just an intrinsic part of them, their DNA, like they're so creative. They love being tedious. And I've heard it all, just like you have. And sometimes like my smart ass will come out and say, so how's that working out for you? Like, basically that's it, right? I don't think we'd be having this conversation if that was working out for you well. I mean, clearly it's not. You're overwhelmed. You're scattered. Things are falling through the cracks. You're dropping balls. And typically women, we don't feel like we're doing anything well. Like, I'm not being the great mom. I'm not being the great business owner. I'm not being the great, partner or daughter, or, it's just, I'm feeling overstretched. And a lot of that, and most of it comes from this lack of planning. So I would say instead of sort of denying this or living in this fantasy, is more to embrace it as a growth opportunity, more to embrace it as an opportunity for you to be a better role model, to be a better boss, to be a better, citizen in your community, and just to honestly like yourself more, like to live more joyously. I mean, who doesn't want more freedom? Who doesn't want more time, more space? We say these are the things we want, right? I realized that you can ask any woman anywhere around the world, and ultimately it boils down to the same goals. Like, there might be different ways to get there, but everybody wants freedom. Everybody wants joy. Everybody wants more time, right? And everybody wants to be more present. And we can't get there if we're never planning ahead. If we're always going to say, oh, that's not who I am, but then that's not in alignment with what you want. So let's embrace this, ladies. Let's just embrace this as like, this is really good for me. This is really powerful. This is going to empower me and help me get closer to my goals.
Awesome. Well, I am definitely sold. And what I learned is that the most important things to me, the creative projects, actually, even the creative projects needed a plan. It's starting with the podcast. I mean, you are a fellow podcaster, so you know this as well. Without a plan, I still wouldn't have a podcast. In fact, I quite famously talked about this in another episode, that I was planning to start a podcast for 2 years. I wasn't planning. I was dicking around and doing all the things that, it was an elaborate perfectionistic procrastination scheme that did not result in a podcast. When did the podcast actually get launched? When I had a 4-week plan with accountability. So let's talk about your framework, because you have converted more than one, I can't plan, I'm a creative, into an actual planner, because you take all the craziness out of it and make it simple, streamlined, and doable, even for creatives. So let's talk about your framework and how you get women from here to their goals.
Well, first of all, I love your raw honesty because I think, you're not alone. We all do that, right? We're like, I've been planning this for so long. No, you're not planning. Just like you said, we're thinking about it. Mm-hmm. We've said something. The thought has crossed our mind, but we haven't planned anything, right? And typically planning, yes, ladies, planning is pen to paper. Like there is just there's something about like actually getting it down on paper, getting it out of your head that makes it real. So from an energetic standpoint, you're actually putting it out in the universe. From a really tactical standpoint, you're actually seeing something visually, you're writing it out, you're like thinking about the next steps. It is virtually impossible to plan in our heads. So we've got to get rid of this thought that everything lives up in our brains and that's going to just come out perfectly, because you know what? We're handling 1,000 things every day, like the home and family and business. We can't keep it all straight up there. So the first
Can I thank you for saying that?
4-step framework. Yeah.
Let me just stop you and thank you for saying that, because a lot of people think, no, I got it. I got it in my head. And it's like, no, there's a lot of other stuff up in there. And unless it's pen to paper, fingers to keyboard, there's a visual, physical representation of your plan, you don't have a plan. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like our brains, I'm going to a little bit off here, but this is so important that we treat our brains as warehouses, like places for storage for all these ideas and these things we're going to do, when actually our brains should be factories. Like they want to be creative. We want to get an idea in there, create it, and get it out, right? And stop treating our brain just like this dusty old storage bin where ideas go and God knows where they are and they're piled up and I can't even find them because, who knows what happened. And start, using your brain as like the beautiful tool that it can be to create these goals, bring them to life, and then make room for new ideas, right? How about that instead? So
I love
that's my little tangent on that. But I really, again, it's like a mindset shift of how we're really thinking, why it's so important to get this stuff out of our head. So one of the first things, and I think you said this when you were talking about the podcast, was it was just in my head. It was in my head. And then at some point you actually got it down. And I think that's the first thing, is getting very clear on what is my goal? What is the vision? This sounds so obvious, right? This sounds like, duh, of course I know what it is. We really don't until we actually start thinking about it. What does that mean to me? What does it look like? What does it feel like? When do I want this goal by? What does that actually mean? So if your goal was to start a podcast, was it to start a podcast this year? Is it to just, is it a weekly podcast? Is it a monthly podcast? I mean, there's so many things. What does that really mean? So in that step, we're just getting a little bit more detailed of that vision. What is that true vision? And we'll go through a process. If I was doing this with my clients, we'd kind of put some detail around it so that when you walk away, before you even start thinking about the planning, you're like, oh, I'm so dead clear on what I want. I don't want to just lose weight. I want to fit into the skinny jeans, or I want to be 15 pounds lighter, or I want to be able to run 3 miles, right? You're so dead clear on what you want that it's inspiring to you. You should leave this first step feeling motivated. And you're like, oh yeah, that's what I want. That's what's going to make me feel successful and rewarded. So get it clear, write it down, get detailed. You can still use that great vision board. That's wonderful, but we really want to get this down on paper.
Okay, I got a question for you. So first step is clarity.
Yep.
Right? Getting it like in your vision. I always think, when I think about clarity, Mridu, I always think about an eye exam. You know how when they're like, is it better now or now? Now or now? And they're like getting closer and closer, because I need a lot of vision correction. So what if the woman really isn't clear? And thinking about getting crystal clear and detailed is actually stressing her out, because she's just not there yet. She knows, let's say, for example, going back to the example of a book, she knows she wants to write a book. She is like thinking maybe self-help or memoir, because she has a very powerful transformational story. But she's like, do I want it to be a how-to, or do I just want to tell my story? And the more she tries to get down to the details, the more she realizes she's just not there yet. Is she just not able to create a plan at this time? And what does she do instead? Because I think a lot of us say, okay, I'm going to make this happen. I know I need the SMART goals. I need to break them down. But what it ends up revealing is we're not clear. We really don't know exactly. So do we just have to scrap it, or what do we do?
That's such a great question. So, and I'm going to give you the answer that probably everyone doesn't want to hear, but this is what's going to push us forward, is to let go of the perfectionism and know that I may not know, and that's totally fine, but just put a stake in the ground. Just put a stake in the ground. Be like, maybe it's a how-to. Fine. Because along the way, along the journey of that book writing process, it's probably going to take you a year. I guarantee you will figure it out. Because you're right. There's so many times we don't know what that is. We put a stake in the ground, and the only way we're going to figure out what it is to take some action, right? Insight without action is meaningless. We have to take some action, start trying some things, fail, succeed, like it, tweak it, change it, whatever. But we just got to start with put a stake in the ground. Know that this is not forever. This is just your personal goal, right? This isn't like out in the world that everybody in the world has to. I mean, this is you. This is your life. You get to mold it however you want. But if you keep just sitting in, well, I don't have enough clarity, can't get started, don't have enough clarity, can't get going, that is just a procrastination tool that's just keeping you from the joy and being rewarded in your life and from reaching those goals. So put a stake in the ground, say this is not forever, and let me just move on. And I will figure it out along the way, just like I have everything else in my life.
This is why you and I are soul sisters, even though we just recently met, because you're right. It's like, okay, I need to be clear in order to take action. Yeah, but you need to be clear enough to take the first step. And you need a plan to keep on taking steps. But as you take those steps, you will figure out whether you're on the right path or not. There's no amount of thinking that will get you that clarity. So I love this distinction, because on the one hand, you're saying it needs to be written, it needs to be detailed, but it's not set in stone.
Right.
Absolutely. So where do we go from there?
And by the way, women, we have a beautiful gift. It's your intuition. So just if you're really stalling, just be like, which is the one that I'm 51% more, or that 51% of me wants to go there? It doesn't have to be 100%, doesn't have to be 75%, just has to be a tiny bit more than no, right? Like that's not the right one. If it's 51%, put a stake in the ground and move on. So that's just another way that I would say, just tap into your intuition. Even if you're like, what everyone says is not going to work, if that's the one that your gut is sort of just guiding you toward and pulling you towards, just put your stake in the ground and you'll figure it out.
Get off the fence.
Okay, so great.
Get moving.
Awesome.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, get off the fence. Exactly. Right. So the second step is a little bit more tactical. The first one was more visioning and changing your mindset and goal setting. And now we're like, okay, I kind of have this sort of vision. I feel like I know some immediate next steps, because that's part of what we do in the goal setting. We're like, what's just one or two like baby next steps you can take? Now we're going to marry that to your calendar and your schedule and actually create the room. Now, again, this cannot be in your head. You cannot say to yourself, I'm going to work on that on Saturday. I'm going to work on that Friday afternoon. Is not going to happen. You know it's not going to happen. This is why we have to marry those thoughts and those steps to the calendar. Actually go on your schedule. Mark it with the big X. Block it off. Put it in red. I don't care. Do something that you're like, this is my committed time to not the whole goal, not to write a book. That is not what's on your calendar. What's on your calendar might be outline, spend 30 minutes on starting to brainstorm an outline. It's not even creating an outline. You're like, I just want to brainstorm some ideas, right? And you start putting these little baby steps, and you start actually committing to those on your calendars in little baby timeframes, like 30 minutes at a time. Mm-hmm. Because the last thing that we need, y'all, is any more overcomplicated anything in our lives, any more overwhelming anything in our lives, right? We just want to keep this small, keep it simple, keep it doable, and keep it actionable. But if it ain't on the calendar, it is not happening.
I'm with you on that.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. If you care enough to commit to it, then you need to be serious enough to put it in your calendar. And, some people like these beautiful, physical analog calendars. Other people use the calendar on their phone. I don't personally think it matters whether it's digital or analog. It's what's the style you're going to commit to and use regularly and consistently. So if it's not written down on the calendar, it's not happening.
And then, not happening. And then you might say, but I don't have time, or, where am I going to fit this in? Well, this is where you got to sometimes make some really tough decisions. If this is that important goal for you, if this is the one you're committed to, is there something else that you have to let go of or sacrifice or push off or delegate or systemize or automate? Like, is there something else may have to move? And this is kind of like the work we do together to say, okay, this shouldn't be adding one more stressful thing to my life. This should be, sometimes it's replacing, sometimes it's substituting, sometimes it's just deleting something else, or sometimes it's just rejiggering. Like, what if we're just a little bit more creative with the way that we're thinking about your schedule so that we can make the time for that? We'd also be talking about things like, what are your energy levels like? When is the best time to be working on this? There's other strategies we're thinking about here, because maybe at the end of the day is when you think you have time, but that's when you're exhausted and you're hangry, and they're like, I'm never stick to it because I don't have the brain capacity or brain bandwidth. And other times you're thinking, so then maybe we're like, we'll switch it to the morning. So there's things we just got to think through as you're putting this on your calendar. But yes, commit to a time and then really think through what would make the most sense and where do you have to make some other changes to commit to that freedom.
What do you find is the most difficult for most women in this part of the framework? What do you think they have the most difficulty with? Like letting things go, or
they are so, I actually think even just the putting a time frame on some of these big goals is something they've never done before. It's something like, oh, I'll do it. I'll do it on a Saturday. I'll do it next week. Like, you think you're doing it, but when you actually put pen to paper again, it's like this commitment or it brings this idea to reality. And it's like, oh, I didn't realize maybe I have that time. I don't have that time. I've got to move something. I think it's actually just putting it down that then opens up all these ahas. And typically we can figure out something to move or do, but it's just even recognizing, oh, this is what's really going to help me move forward. And it's relatively simple idea, right? But it's not something we do for those, especially those big personal and professional goals.
I would agree. Yeah. And I think a lot of people resist or avoid putting something down because then it feels like an obligation. But it's an obligation you're choosing. And I prefer to think of it as a commitment, because most women's days, months, decades, lives are consumed with other people's needs, wishes, wants, preferences, and priorities. So if we aren't willing to, as you say, claim, set a stake in the ground and claim that time for our goal, it's not going to happen. And I think by putting that stake in the ground, by putting that time, that designated time on your calendar, in my experience, that's when you discover your mindset bullshit. Because now you're like, I have the time.
Absolutely.
I've designated the time. I've scheduled the time. So when you are still resisting, procrastinating, and avoiding, it's what's going on upstairs. That's the reason. So that's when you need to clean that stuff up, because you've just proven to yourself that you can make time. Now, why are you still not doing it? And usually it's mindset stuff.
Right. Yeah. And absolutely. And also one thing in the first part, when we actually create these goals together, I mentioned they should leave you very inspired and motivated. And we'll go through an exercise with my clients that we're connecting to your goal every day. So every day you're anchored to it in the beginning, at the end of your day. You're always anchored to your goal, because we do set goals and they just, after a week, you're like, I don't even remember what my goal was because I'm doing 100 other things
all the time.
So it's really important that when you're anchored to it all the time, right? But when you're anchored to it on a daily basis, it shouldn't feel like an obligation. Now, it does feel more like an exciting commitment. Like it does feel like more of an adventure or something I'm looking forward to. And that's part of like, I think, really great goal setting. Like it should be something exciting, even if it's like, I want to get a better routine in my day, or, it should leave you the way you've written it, the way it's connected to your kind of bigger why should leave you really excited about it. So that just made me think about that when you said it's like an obligation. It shouldn't feel like that if you're
I love that distinction, Mridu. I love that distinction because an obligation is something you resent and resist. And it's usually for someone else. And we do need to be reminded because, as I say, my ladies are driven but distracted. So it's not that they don't want the goal. It's just that they keep getting pulled away by a multitude of other things. But the way you've described it, like bookending your day by reminding yourself and refreshing your screen, if you will, of your mind and anchoring to that at the beginning and the end of each day, that would do a lot to keep you focused on the prize and not drifting away and, getting distracted by something else. I love that.
Yeah, no, it's super helpful. And I think we all need it. Everyone's lives are too crazy and too hectic. So we all need to be like really tied to those.
Perfect.
But okay, so let's move to the third piece. So let's say you like nail these, Diane. You're like, I'm so clear on my goal. I do have a lot of clarity. I have figured out how to get this on my time, on my calendar, my schedule. And I've moved things around. I'm working with my energy and I'm feeling really excited about it. Here's the deal. If you don't have this third piece, it's essentially probably going to all fall apart in about a day or two.
No.
And that is some type of system. I know, but this happens, right? We all know it. We've all been there, right? You have like the exercise routine for a couple of days, or you have the email routine of, with how you're handling your email, or even the writing for a couple of days. And then it's like, like falls through the wayside. So you have to create some type of system or process around it so that you can maintain it. So again, you continue to feel motivated by it, that it's working for you and not against you. And it alleviates the stress and overwhelm. Like systems are in place because they put that kind of like those barriers, like thinking of the bowling alley, what are those called on the side? The guardrails. It puts the guardrails around it so that things don't fall off, right? That's what a system is. And it's so much more, well, let's just say you can just stick to it far greater when you have that system. So there's many different ways to do that. We won't get into tons of detail, but a system can be super simple, like a 2-step, really like, I'm going to get this email. I'm either going to delete it or put it in a folder. Very simple. Sometimes they're a little bit longer. There's like more like workflows. There's 4 or 5 steps. Whatever it is, they typically don't have to be that complicated, and they're typically not. I think we tend to overcomplicate them. Some systems can be very simple. And what it does at this point is allows you, when you start creating a system around it, it gives you an opportunity to really be thinking through, well, here's all the steps to get from point A to point Z, or what in this system doesn't belong on my plate? What part of this can I outsource? What part of this can I automate? What part of this can I systemize, right? Maybe to someone else. What seems duplicative here? Why do I still feel exhausted when I'm doing this, right? And you start identifying all these opportunities that you can either streamline it, you can simplify it, you can get it off your plate. And again, it just makes it so much more doable. So it's just fabulous. And I absolutely believe you cannot over systemize your life, which is the scariest thing for someone to hear when they are really creative, when they are really spontaneous. They're like, oh my God, no, the system, the structure. But I guarantee
even the word,
systems,
even the word is stressful for a lot of people.
So much freedom. Yeah. Yes. But systems are freedom. It's freedom. It's total freedom.
I have several questions for you about systems. Mm-hmm. We need to take a little break and we will be right back because I definitely need to dig more into this. I think systems, you're right. We do tend to overcomplicate them and it ends up seeming like, how is this going to create freedom? It seems like it's creating more work. So we will be right back after this message. Hey, Driven Woman. I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. Maybe you've been listening to it from the beginning, or maybe you are a brand new listener, but either way, I am so glad you're here. And I hope that you are being inspired and motivated and actually learning how to move your life forward with each and every episode you hear. But I want you to know that there is a whole other level that is so much more powerful, and that is actually working with me. I want to invite you to consider that this fall 2021, is your time. I'm reintroducing my group coaching program. It'll be a small group experience that I will carefully curate by choosing the just right members. You might be one of them. To get on the interest list, click on the link in the show notes. There's no obligation, but you won't be able to hear the details unless you get on the list. Okay? So it's coming soon. I want to make sure that you learn everything you want to know to make the right choice for you. Now, if one-on-one is the only way for you to go, there's a link for that too. That starts with a free consultation to make sure that I'm the right coach for the right reason at the right time for you. But if group is more your jam, you got to get on the list. You want to hear from one of my other clients and what she felt about working with me? Have a listen to this.
So I remember when we talked about what you introduced as habit stacking, so pairing your habits. And when you did initially bring that up, my initial reaction was like, ugh, like that sounds awful. Like, I don't want to do that. But that was like one of the first things that one of the first shifts that our work together had changed. And that is something that I'm grateful for every day. So the first thing I do in the morning is I go pee. And so what your advice was, take your medication, right after, have your glass of water there in the bathroom. And so that's sort of my daily routine. It's going to the bathroom, taking my medication, contacts, coffee. Yeah. And it's great because it just cuts out any chance of forgetting, which then would lead to kind of lollygagging around. And I'm like, oh, wait, have I taken it? I should take it. Wait, but this one other thing. And so that really starts off the day so consistently and well. So that is the first thing. And then with regards to the rest of my morning routine, my best friend and I, we live together and we exercise in the morning now. So we've been doing that for the past 4 months, like at least 4 days a week. And so we do beach body, and it's just really fun because we do have the accountability of there's going to be someone waiting for you. So your butt better be up.
Okay, so we are back, and you have just explained that systems create freedom. But I got to admit, I'm a little bit confused. What we've been talking about is even though you can be very clear or clear enough about your goal, you've got your to-do list, you've broken it down into the tasks, it has been dedicated on your schedule, and even then, without systems, you're probably not going to make it. What would be an example of the kind of system that would allow you to keep moving? Because in my mind, I've got my to-do list. I know what my goal is. I've devoted the specific time on my calendar. So what else do I need? I'm on a roll here. So what kind of systems are we talking about, Mridu?
Okay, great. So let's do a real simple one. Let's say like bill payment, because I feel like this is a lot of times, whether it's for your work or home, we're missing bills. We get late payments. We're like running around. We can't find it. Is it, it's an issue. I feel like there's an issue for a lot of my clients. So you're like, okay, the goal is I want to be on top of them. I want to feel really empowered by this. I want to feel like I've got a handle on it. We've done step 2. We're like, all right, I'm going to set some time on my calendar to work on it. But then the time comes around the calendar and you're like, I don't know where the heck my bills are. Some are in the drawer, some are in the mail, some are over here. I can't find them. Did I pay this one? I don't know what it's just, and it's like you spend that whole time that you're supposed to be paying them and getting it done, you're like just frenetic and you're still scattered. And now you're getting distracted because now you have the pile of mail. And instead of trying to get the bill out, now you see, oh, there's that thing for my daughter's camp and there's that thing for work. And you start getting distracted on that, right? And like the squirrel happens. And now you've not hit your goal. You've not stuck to the calendar and you've done 10 other things. And the day it basically goes by and you're like, damn it, I didn't even do the bill. So, right. So that's like a very typical thing. So let's say the system was, as you get the mail, whether it's you're looking at daily or weekly, as a bill comes in, you have a separate bin, a separate organizer, a separate bin that you put all the bills in there at one time. So every time that they come in, that's where they go. Okay. So and then maybe you have two bins, maybe one is like a work one and one is personal. So when your time comes around to paying them, you open them, and now maybe the system is what you've done is you've put them all into an online banking system, so you can pay everything in one place instead of 10 different places. So I don't have to look for my passwords. I don't have to figure out. And so it's all in from your bank. They're all connected. And now you can open each one, pay it, put it in the pile that's paid. And so I want to say I'm oversimplifying this, but I'm not, because that's how simple it could be, right? And now at the end of that 30 minutes that you've blocked off, you've paid all the bills. Nothing's going to fall through the cracks. You're feeling great. And so what kind of freedom has this given you? You've gone to bed that night knowing it's done. You're not waking up at 3 a.m. thinking, oh my God, did I get a late payment again? You have so much mental freedom, right? And it's efficient. Like you're just done with it. It's like, check it off the list. Don't have to think about it. And I don't have to do it again for another 14 days. It's like that simple little system there just saved you mental anguish, like worrying. You got better sleep. You're not worried about your bank account, like going over all the things. And does that make sense? Like that's such a little
I understand now, because what I'm thinking, pulling the thread through. So let's say your goal is to be on top of your finances. And so then you create the to-do list from that, which is, I'm going to pay my business bills. I'm going to pay my personal bills. I'm going to put the due dates. I'm going to highlight the due dates on the statements. I'm going to put them in this folder on my desk with a little tag on it. And I'm going to put that time on my calendar. And then the system would be you set up either a physical system or a digital system. Let's go back to the example of writing the book so that we can take that example all the way through. So let's say instead of the goal being financial, organization, the goal is, I've had this book in my head for 10 years. It needs to happen this year. So that's the big goal. Then you get clarity around it in step 1. Step 2, you've committed to it in writing. It's visual. Now it's scheduled in appropriate, bite-sized, manageable chunks, not write book, but outline table of contents, outline first chapter, that sort of stuff. But what system or systems would be appropriate for the book goal?
So part of that system might just even be your environment. So my system might be, I'm going to go to my writing space. Maybe let's just say it's my office. I'm going to clear everything, right? So I'm fully focused for that 30 minutes that I have to think, to brainstorm the table of contents. The next part of my system might be, I'm going to put on a timer. I'm going to put on a 30-minute timer. I'm going to put my phone, third part, I'm going to put my phone on do not disturb or just leave it down in the kitchen. Okay. I'm going to have a Google Doc or a Google Drive that houses everything systematically, like organized, like chapters. So table of contents, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. Part of that system could be, and that really could be it. And that's really it for that moment. You're like, I have my time. I have my environment. I know where my documents are. I've cleared my space. And I've done everything that allows this to work, to set me up for success.
Now I understand.
That becomes your system for that.
Now I understand.
Right. It might change a little bit. Right. Yeah. It might change. But imagine if you had that little checklist, right? Like you had that, because here's the thing. You go to your desk and again, you're like a squirrel. You start doing 100 things. You see the papers, you're seeing the boxes. You're like, get the email. It is really important to have that simple little 5 checklist of, put everything in do not disturb, turn off email, clear desk, put on timer, and, whatever else I said, and start moving, And so that is part of the systemizing, just pen to paper. This pen to paper is never going to end. We're doing it in goal setting. We're pen to paper on the calendar, and we're pen to paper on that system. And it's as simple as a checklist on a sticky note. Y'all don't overcomplicate it, but at the same time, don't think it's so simple that you can skip that. Right?
This is
skip
this
that
is
step
the
of
thing.
writing it
Yep.
down and getting it visual.
Mhm.
Yeah. We oversimplify. Like we're like, oh, I got that. Oh, that's easy. No, then why aren't we doing it? Again, how's that working out for you? Right? Like get the yellow sticky, put on your 5 points of things I got to do. This is my little system. Yeah. So you're right. And maybe that word just means like workflow and, visual, like
Process
automation when we think of system, but it's process. But it's like, what are the simple steps that will set you up for success and keep you focused and make things more efficient at the same time?
It's totally clear now. So it's basically in the first step, you're getting specific. In the second step, you're getting scheduled. In the third step, it's sort of like, I think I got a little hung up on the word system, but basically in your framework, a system is, okay, this is what you're going to do specifically. This is when you're going to do it. And this is how you're going to do it. And only putting in as much complexity as you need to set you up for success. So if your system is, I'm going to write this book 30 minutes a day, every day, doesn't matter how many words it is. I'm not going to count the words, but I'm going to write for 30 minutes from 9 a.m. to 9:30 in this room with my cup of tea and the door locked and my phone turned off and all the other tabs on my computer closed. And I've got a timer, a countdown timer. And when I get to 30 minutes, I will save the document. I will close my laptop and I will move on to the next thing. And that's the system. It's basically like, how are you going to do it? And what are the things you need to include to prevent you from getting distracted, interrupted, going off task, or forgetting all about it? Perfect.
Absolutely. And that's literally exactly what you said is how I wrote my book. Exactly. I did 30 minutes, whether I got 5 words down or 500 words down that day. It was 30 minutes. Here's my timer, turn everything else off, phone in the other room, and then shut my laptop and did it again the next day. And that was my system. And it was as simple as that. And sometimes those systems can require you, I guess, to use other things. So back to that billing one, we're like, okay, maybe part of that system was to get everything online on your bank in one place, right? So it was like, it was also leveraging a technology tool. I mean, sometimes the systems require something else than just your environment. But again, it doesn't, 9 out of 10 times, they're relatively simple. These are not, they don't have to be complicated. I think we overcomplicate things. We make them to be a bigger deal. If we just, again, broke it down, it's like a theme here, break it down, get pen to paper, we can really simplify all these little chunks of time.
That totally makes sense. Actually, just even hearing you describe it, it's like, because your brain is going to come up with all kinds of what ifs. This is just how we overthink and overcomplicate. So it's like, okay, I know what I'm going to do and I know when I'm going to do it, but what about this? And what about that? And what about, what if the dog needs to be walked? And what if the kids are hungry? And what if my husband, needs a ride to whatever? And it's like, no, this is what's going to happen then. And the rest of it can happen later. It's like you've got a container of expectations that you can be accountable to. Like like you said, maybe you only write 5 words one day and you write 1,000 words another day, but your system is 30 minutes and then it's a win. People don't think that you can actually get a book done that way. And I've worked with a lot of writers and they're like, I can't write every day. One of them just sent me an article yesterday that says, what if you can't write every day? I'm like, you can argue for whatever you believe, but your book isn't getting written. So don't argue for that. Don't argue for that.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes a lot of the systems, as you're creating the system, you're truly just creating habits, right? So that's like the habit of writing every day, the habit of exercising every day, the habit of getting this on your schedule, the habit of sitting in silence, the habit, and it's another way that I think we just don't value how much systems help us. When you say it's freedom, they're creating this basically it's this personal growth in us, right? It's creating us. It's like who we become. I always say a goal is it's not important about reaching the goal necessarily. It's like who you become on the way.
Yes.
Who are you becoming on the way to writing that book? Oh, I'm becoming someone who has integrity in myself. Like what I actually do, what I set out, what I say I'm going to do. Like you're becoming more confident. You're feeling more empowered. You're putting up, and we'll get to step 4, more boundaries, because I can say, oh no, I can't meet you for coffee because I have 30 minutes on my calendar, right? It's who you become to get to that goal. And that's part of this whole systemizing or processizing. It's allowing you to become a better version of yourself every day.
I love this. You know what else I love about it is the more, I have the same struggles you do convincing clients to develop routines and habits and systems because I work with creative people too. And I am a creative person. But what I have discovered from making these changes in my own life, Mridu, is that it eliminates resistance and decision fatigue. Because if I literally have to decide every day, do I feel like writing today? Do I really want to work on my book today? I'm kind of not really feeling it. Maybe I can do it tomorrow and do twice as much. If I have got a habit, that means my brain has taken over making sure it happens. Because once you do something consistently enough, long enough, your brain actually creates a neural pathway that makes you just do that thing automatically. And then you don't have to do the heavy lifting of do I want to or don't I? Do I feel like it or don't I? That whole decision fatigue, which is very tiring, is eliminated once you've got the habit. You don't engage in all that struggle. You just do the thing you're in the habit of doing. That is freedom. I had heard it for years, but I didn't believe it. And then when I finally got sick of not reaching my most important goals, I thought, well, I've tried everything else. I'm going to try this. Son of a gun, it works. Planning, scheduling, systematizing, creating habits frickin' works. And as a creative, I thought, but not for me. No, even for you. So what's step 4?
Yes. So step 4, that's the doozy. This is the one that we struggle with the most.
Oh no.
This is, and again, I'll say you can do the first 3 so great. Like I got the goal, I got the clarity, it's on the calendar, I'm working with my energy levels. I even have this awesome system around it. But if I don't put boundaries around my time, my goals, what I set out to do, you'll totally risk failure again, right? Because you can have all those pieces in place, but if you can't stand by it, if you can't communicate to others, if you can't show up as a leader and stand true to this is my time, or, this is what I committed to, then you're just going to fall to the needs and the demands and the requests of everybody else. You are just living in a complete reactionary mode all day, and you let other people's demands come in the way of your goals and your progress. And I know it's like the oldest analogy in the book, the whole you got to put on your oxygen mask first in the plane before you can deal with the kids or the person next to you. But it's the same thing, y'all. It's the cliche because it's true. It's like if you don't take care of yourself first, you will never, no matter how hard you're working, no matter how many hours, no matter how much time you're putting in energy, you will never be able to serve others, to your best capacity until you take care of yourself. So you've got to uphold your boundaries. I know we could talk about this for days.
Forever.
And so again, we don't have to forever, right? And let's not overcomplicate this. Let's just make this simple. So people are like, no, but my clients are calling me, my kids are calling me, my colleagues and all that. Let's just make this really simple. Okay, first of all, I'll say a couple things on this. Do not rely on willpower when it comes to your boundaries. This is the biggest mistake I see us making. We don't have a lot of willpower. We don't do well with willpower. So instead of the distraction saying, I'm not going to look at that. I'm not going to touch that. I'm not going to respond to that. Oh, I'm not going to touch that. No, just get rid of it. There is no reason to be expending your energy on trying to use your willpower to not do it. Just don't have it. So just put the cell phone, turn it off, put it in the other room, put on do not disturb. Yes. Close the email, You are not kidding yourself. You're like, who are you kidding? You're going to check the email. Turn off the social media. You're not, like these are 30-minute increments we're talking about. This isn't the end of the world. We've got to start retraining ourselves, but don't do it through willpower. That's not the way for success. Do it by just getting it out of there. So on that note, if you have the email closed, well, then your clients will wait 20 minutes until you're done. It'll be okay. The world will not fall apart, right? Or you tell your kids, hey, for the next 25 minutes, mom can't be disturbed. Watch your video, do your homework, eat a snack, whatever. Until you see that door open, don't come in here unless like you said, unless it's a fire or someone's blood, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are simple ways for us to take control. Stop blaming everyone else. Stop thinking it's out of your control. Stop saying that it's because of everybody else that they take my time. No, you treat them, they learn to treat you how you've taught them, right? We train people this way. You want to take control of your time? You can take control of your time. I will stop my diatribe, but
preach. No, I'm not kidding. Like this is exactly, this is a lot of the work that I do because women are notoriously poor at setting boundaries. And I think for me, tell me if you agree, fundamentally, setting boundaries is not difficult. What makes it difficult is that we don't believe that we matter. We don't believe that our needs, our wishes, our wants, our goals, our dreams, our plans are important enough to prioritize. Every woman I've ever met thinks, once I take care of everyone else, once I have met the needs of my partner, my children, my friends, my parents, my pets, my clients, like everybody else on the list is taken care of, then I'll take care of me. Honey, that list just keeps getting longer. More beings keep jumping on that list. You have to move yourself up. And I know it's a big ask to say, put yourself at the top, but that's the direction you need to be headed. And you can take it in a few steps. But we all know, just like with the to-do list, it just keeps getting longer. The list of other people who come before you will follow suit. So, but making the bold choice to believe that your goals actually matter and you actually deserve to prioritize them and achieve them and protect the time necessary to do so, that can take some work because as women, we've been culturally conditioned to believe the opposite. But you and I have both found our way to that choice and are trying to spread the word to other women as well. It can be done. It may not be easy. And like you said, the fourth step is the hardest, but absolutely necessary. Absolutely necessary.
Absolutely. 100%. Absolutely necessary. Yeah. I mean, I think, again, even writing this out, one last thing, a pen and paper can really, really help. It's just like seeing it there, being like, this is my commitment. These are small actions, but they're so meaningful. If I can say, no, not right now, maybe later. Can we pick a time? Sometimes just even role playing that language, because when you're asked, because we're good people and we're kind, it's just like at the moment, you're like, oh, okay, yeah. Yes, like invade my space at this point. But if you can just practice that a bit, and sometimes I think if you can do it, so it's like a muscle that needs to be flexed every day, right? Like kind of this putting up that boundaries, or maybe saying no, or not a good time right now, or I'm working on something. So if you can start with this, like the small things every day. So like if you're at the grocery store and they're like, do you want this 2-for-1 candy at the, when you're checking out, you'd be like, no, thank you. It's okay. Or when you're walking out of Trader Joe's and they hand you a flyer and you're like, no, it's okay. I already have enough. Or if you can just like practice in the small ways in your life of getting comfortable with sort of saying no, or no, thank you, or not right now. Then when the bigger decisions, or those bigger opportunities come for you to sort of push back, it becomes a little easier because it's become part of your language and like you flex that muscle. So I think there's so many ways over the course of the day that we can start practicing this so it becomes part of like your daily way that you show up.
Absolutely. And you're right. You don't start with the hardest thing. You start with something that's more manageable. Somebody offers you something and you're like, no, thanks. You might feel a little bit uncomfortable, but the more practice you get, the more it becomes part of your repertoire. So you have just laid out a beautiful framework for how to go from, I don't know what to do, all the way to done. I'm very sure that there are people listening that are like, okay, I definitely need to know more about this. So where do you like people to follow you online? And you have a podcast. So let's tell them all the things. Where do you like people to follow you on social media? Your business is Life is Organized. Your podcast is Productivity on Purpose. We will link to those in the show notes. Is there anything else that you want to share or tell people about who want to get more of you, Mridu?
Yeah, I would say the best way for us to connect, to just get to know each other better, which is what I just love to do. I'd love to hear from you, is come on over to lifeisorganized.com/resources. And I have a bunch of just great resources for you to pick and choose from, like how to stop procrastinating, or how to finally get focused, or how to stop feeling overwhelmed, or how to create a perfect to-do list. So you can take one or you can take your pick of all, but come on over there. I think that's the best way for us to just really get to know each other.
That's awesome. It's like, come look in my pantry and take as many snacks as you want. I think that is a fantastic offer. And, you and I will continue to be chatting because there's just so much good stuff that we share. But I love how simple you've made this, and also that you were able to talk about how you orchestrate productivity in a very consistent way where you stay on the path, don't get distracted, don't get lost. It's just 4 steps, and you break them down into bite-sized baby steps that anyone can do. So thank you so much for sharing that and for just being, the fun, enjoyable person you are. Really appreciate you being here.
Diane, thank you so much for having me, for sharing me with your awesome audience. And I know this conversation between us is going to go on for a long time. I'm very grateful for our friendship.
Awesome. Okay, that's it, Driven Women. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.
You've been listening to the Driven Woman podcast with Diane Wingert. Want more straight talk and strategy each week that will take you from spinning to winning? Don't forget to hit subscribe in your podcast player so you won't miss a single episode. Then head on over to the Driven Woman free and private Facebook group community. See you there.